Prime Minister, what do you say to the growing number of people who see the two main political parties simply as Tweedledum and Tweedledee?
It's fairly easy to come along as a third party and say all sorts of programmes.
That there have been disagreements between yourself and the Chancellor.
There have not been many troubles.
Violent crime is rising. Is that what you meant by the New Britain?
No, we accept there are all sorts of things we've still got to do.
Show and a new political era.
I think Zach Polanski is incredibly well motivated. It's just he's wrong about everything.
Are you more of a Shabana person or a Wes person or an Angie person?
We're in a weird world where this is going to be the definitive electoral event.
I think that your party as a national project is dead.
MPs all want some action.
General election.
You're joking. Not another one?
I feel like that.
Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you for sticking with us. Yes, possibly coming soon. This last session, brilliantly titled The Hounds of Westminster, I don't know who that's referring to. That's us or them, but we'll get to that in the course of this conversation. My name's James Harding. I'm the editor of The Observer and as the founder of Tortoise Media. And the reason that I'm here is that Harry Evans was the inspiration for that and was the person who enabled that to happen. And his example, as we saw right at the beginning of the day, both as a joyous practitioner of journalism, but as a dogged one who believed in taking time, was the person who really inspired us to take a different route in journalism and reporting. And I say that because there is a lovely symmetry to this day, that this, the last panel conversation, begins with Gabriel Pogrund, who anyone in the UK knows is one of the best, possibly the best investigative reporter covering power in this country, and has just been promoted to lead the Insight team, which was itself Harry's creation. So it's brilliant, Gabriel, to have you here. If journalism means anything at all, it means loving the question. And Beth Rigby, I think it is fair to say, if you watch Sky News, in fact, you don't even need to watch Sky News for Beth, you seem to be everywhere. On social media, your questions, more than any others, seem to dominate the conversations. And Beth, Sky's political editor, is joining us too. And we have Michael Gove, who I worked with when he was in the newsroom at the Times. He then took a small detour for a decade or more, served longer than anyone else in British cabinets over the course of the coalition and Conservative governments, and then returned to your true calling as a journalist and now the editor of The Spectator. So please welcome our panel. I know that usually we do those quick-fire questions right at the end. Can we start with a quick-fire question? In fact, two. Will there be a leadership contest within the next week, at least triggered within the next week? And who will be Prime Minister this time next year? Michael, you first.
No, and Keir Starmer.
Ooh.
Beth.
I hate doing quick fire. I like a qualified answer. My answer to the first one will be, I don't think so. And I've actually just come back from, this is not quick fire, it's like, shut up, Beth, get on with it. I've actually just come back from interviewing Lucy Powell, the Deputy Labour leader in Manchester. And she's told me very clearly that she's going to back Starmer, whatever the results of this election. And that's very telling, because what that tells you is that it looks like the party, and certainly the soft left, or big chunks of it, abide in their time. So to the first question, I would say no. To the second question, I'm not sure. And Lucy Powell also talked a lot about Andy Burnham coming back into Parliament and how she would like this extremely popular, as she put it, politician back in. And I think that there is a settled view amongst the Cabinet and Westminster that Starmer will not lead the party into the next general election. So then it's a case of when do they move? So I don't know on the second one. It could be that Andy Burnham, I think, would be the most likely of all the candidates at the moment, but he's got the small problem of getting back into Parliament. That's more complicated than he might like it to be.
Gabriel, leadership challenge in the week, and who next year?
So I know we've dwelled a lot today on the threats that journalists face, so I wish to be self-aware in saying I know that following does not count as real harassment or intimidation of reporters, but Keir Starmer said something quite mean about me not that long ago, which was that he described the thesis of a book I'd co-written with my colleague Patrick Maguire, which portrayed Starmer as the monkey to Morgan McSweeney's organ grinder. He described its central thesis as bollocks. And I think with the passage of time, there might be something more to that, in that I think it is possible that he wasn't just the plaything of Morgan McSweeney. He wasn't the passenger at the front of McSweeney's DLR. He's the passenger at the front of the DLR, or the train that is being driven by whoever holds power in the Labour Party in a given moment. And I think the soft left of the Parliamentary Labour Party, they have reasserted themselves. They have established, as they often have, that they are the centre of gravity in a party. They're going to dominate its next phase. And I think they may end up determining that keeping Starmer where he is, but bringing to bear on his project and bringing him to the left, is a more bloodless and efficient way of exercising control over British politics. And I'm just going to steal Beth's answer and say on the second one, I don't know.
But what you're basically saying is most likely not a leadership contest within the next week, and very possibly Starmer this time next year.
Very possibly, but yeah, the reason is I think that there are too many collective action problems, and in the end, one thing that the PLP can agree on is this Starmer guy is he's open for doing business with us. You know, we learned that from winter fuel, from welfare reform.
Right.
He is open for business in ways that conviction politicians like Blair may not have been, possibly to his own detriment in the end.
So can we step back and just talk to begin with about the relationship between politics and journalism? And Michael, actually, I wanted to ask you, thinking about your past life and thinking about your colleagues as politicians, because I suppose many journalists would say, actually, if you look at investigative journalism, accountability journalism in Westminster, in the UK, you look at what happened to Boris, you look at the investigations into Sunak, you look at, the Mandelson story, the Harborne story. Accountability journalism seems in rude health, but others might say, actually, no, it's just a blood sport, what's happened in Westminster. The press is just trying to pull people down. When you were a politician, did you feel as though the press stopped Britain from being well governed?
No. I was paranoid. I occasionally felt that the coverage was unjust. I sometimes found myself uncomfortable reading accounts of things, sometimes because they were stunningly accurate, at other times because they were close to invention. But overall, if one takes a step back, the coverage was fair, probably analytically more rigorous and more challenging than in almost any other jurisdiction. And actually, I was a minister during the coalition years. During those years, a very, for this generation of British politicians, novel arrangement with people who were in an arranged political marriage worked for those 5 years because the people at the top were high quality.
And Beth, you must hear this all the time, that, that Westminster journalism, lobby journalism, is just not serious. It's a game of gotcha. Fair or not?
I don't think it is fair. I think part of the challenge is that politics has got faster, news cycles have got more intense, media organisations have proliferated as platforms have grown. And I remember when I first started working at the FT a very, very long time ago, you would hopefully get a good story, you'd hopefully get it on the front page, everyone would go to bed, and in the morning it would be on the stands, and there you had your scoop, you had your front page, your job was done. It has just completely transformed now. And the reason I talk about that is I think that there's more of a pressure cooker mentality. I think there's more pressure, there's more intensity. But actually, if you look at what happened, be it in the Johnson regime when that whole government collapsed eventually, or what's happened to Starmer, the fault lines of the government isn't journalists making mischief. It's actually take Starmer. It's the mistakes of Starmer's administration, be that to say they're not going to raise taxes in a manifesto and then bung 25 billion on business with the fallout that creates, or not alerting the public to winter fuel and then doing that, or deciding to cut welfare by 5 billion to try and help the chancellor with the public finances, but not sell that to your party. And actually, really, what journalists are doing, and I know sometimes this sort of charge gets made towards us, but we're just reporting and reflecting what's actually happening in politics. I mean, the Prime Minister has changed his Chief of Staff, twice, 3 times? His Communications Director 4 times? He's had, 3 political directors, all in the space of 18 months to 2 years. And all of you working where you work know that when you have that much churn, that there's problem and dysfunction, and actually journalists are reflecting that.
There's a different case Gabriel made against the lobby, which is that's not where the stories are. That there's a problem with the access of the lobby, and the best investigative work happens outside it. Now, you've broken some big stories, and you have been, to an extent, outside it. It was interesting this morning, Emma Tucker was talking about one of her journalists being expelled from the lobby, and how much better his work got as a result of that. So what do you think is the answer to the question of where the best stories lie in politics?
Great question. I mean, I don't have any monopoly on wisdom in response, but I will say that I think the beauty of the lobby system is that it gives you proximity that can, when at its best, lead to stories that otherwise wouldn't have come out. So I feel, I mean, this conference is such a brilliant event because it's remedying the long-term predicament of the British press, which is that sometimes I think we lack confidence to tell stories about ourselves in a way that our American colleagues do. But Partygate's a really good example of a story which, occasioned the collapse of the British government, and that would not have happened were it not for the incredibly tightly wired relationships that exist between the political class and journalists. So I think when done well, it can work brilliantly. I think when done poorly, I just think it can. I don't think this is particularly. I don't think this is a dissident opinion. It can just get so boring. We've been asking the same question about Starmer's fate for so long. The only one thing I'll say is that Starmer himself has given effect to that situation by, because of some of the reasons that Beth just alluded to. He has so often failed to have a story to occupy us, and also to rebut the charge that he is an empty vessel, that there is no substance at the heart of the political project. I think we are quite good, possibly in the lobby. The lobby can be quite feral, and it can think and act as a pack, but when it does sense weakness, it magnifies that weakness. And when it sees strength, maybe incorrectly, it magnifies that strength.
So can we talk, I mean, it's interesting you say that about the US, and you're right. We often look kind of longingly at the US and the culture of journalism and the heroics of American journalism. It's also true that right now, I think you look at the US and you worry about the UK importing the impunity of American politics and politicians and the sense of powerlessness of the press. And I suppose if I'm calling it as I see it, what we're really talking about there is Nigel Farage and reform. And you can live in a world in which a crypto billionaire based in Thailand can give £12 million to essentially reshape British politics, and a personal gift to Nigel Farage of £5 million, 50 years worth of backbench salary, and it seems as though nothing happens. And the press can expose that and nothing happens. And I want to just take a moment, Beth, of a clip of you, if you don't mind, talking to Nigel Farage, just to give us a flavour of what may or may not be happening to accountability journalism in this country.
You also pledged, or some of your candidates did, to cut council tax when they were trying to win elections at local level, and that's gone up. So how do you trust anything you say?
Wrong. Never once last year in the county campaign, including here in Derbyshire, did I ever say that we cut council tax.
Some of your candidates did.
No.
They haven't. They've put it up.
No. Our literature...
I'll check what the people in Kent said, because they're putting it up.
You can listen if you want to, or we can jack it in now. It's entirely up to
listening.
you.
Oh, God,
Bravo.
so fun.
But tell us, Beth, are the rules of engagement changing?
I mean, just after that cliff, I was going, I wish I'd gone, I'm right. I wish I'd done it. That would have been so cool.
Can I just say, next time my editor says I've not delivered enough good stories of late, I'm going to say that.
I mean, just look for the context that was also on a petrol forecourt in Buxton with a massive press pack. So that was not the forum to forensically unpick Nigel Farage's comments. But in all seriousness, I think the reason that clip matters, and we did come back to it in a longer sit-down, is that when you are interviewing not just Nigel Farage, but other politicians now, my strategy now is always take my receipts. So whenever I'm interviewing someone, I will have all of the facts to hand. So I'll have all of the facts about the council tax rises, because they have lifted council tax in places that they told candidates told the public that they would not. It's also equally true that overall the 12 led reform councils have raised it overall slightly less than other parties, right? But it's what did you tell voters? But I think there's a couple of things to say in all seriousness. That is not the forum to hold someone to account, because you haven't got a mic there really, and I'm trying my best, but in the end, he's got the microphone and I haven't. So you have to have a forum for it, which is a proper sit-down.
But I suppose what I'm getting at is whether or not reform thinks a bit like Trump, that actually it can drive a coach of horses through that accountability. And I just wanted to ask Gabriel, actually, because you've broken recently this Richard Tice story around tax, and I've seen, of course, Anna Isaac's story on the 5 million. It feels as though reform chooses either not to respond or to essentially play its response through in the Harborne case, the Telegraph, i.e. get a soft landing for its story.
I mean, that is true. So with Tice, I still can't get my head around the way that their response, the overt cynicism of the way in which they've responded. So I had 3 stories. The first one said that Tice had used an exceptionally complex set of arrangements to lawfully avoid tax. And to show that I was being fair, I repeatedly conveyed in the story and in my social media output that he hadn't broken the law. Then the following day, Richard Tice opened a press conference. Gabriel Pogrund, who has himself admitted I've done nothing wrong, so cynically excising a particular flattering phrase. Then stories 2 and 3 actually said he did fail to pay tax, to a far greater tune than Angela Rayner ended up having to resign in relation to. In the second story, he accused Dan Needle, who had verified our working. He wasn't the sort, he'd verified it. It said, this story came from a Labour activist, a Labour-supporting, campaigning tax expert. Wasn't true. But it was all a stunt in the run-up to local elections. Zia Youssef, Robert Jenner, they all echoed this notion that we did it because of the elections, which obviously is just a ridiculous failure to comprehend the way newsrooms work. The third one was actually possibly their deftest attempt at forestalling scrutiny, which was for days. We always give, at the Sunday Times, we give people a fair crack of the whip. We gave them time. Not only did they not respond to the third story, which said he'd failed to pay 100k in tax, they failed at any point to confirm receipt of our inquiries, knowing that that would make our lives exceptionally difficult on legal grounds. I went to Tice, I went to Tice's solicitor, who'd upbraided me days earlier for not going to him directly, went to Farage's spinner, not a word from any of them, called them about 40 times. They thought maybe it would deter us from doing it. But no, I have been super interested in the way they've responded, because they clearly think that they can, I think they think they can I think they think that they can learn from Labour's missteps by not accepting the premise of basic scrutiny.
But Michael, can I just ask you, what's going on with you and reform, and the Spectator and reform? It feels as though you're sort of reform curious, that you're sort of tickling Nigel's tummy, that you are that a whole load of things, principles and values and ways in which you would hold the Conservative or Labour to account, don't quite hold for Nigel, that you're just intrigued.
I don't think that's true. I'll be certainly intrigued. So it's the biggest story in British politics at the moment, or has been over the course of the last 12 months, has been reform's rise. So, and reform's rise, the fact that for more than 12 months now they've been leading consistently in the polls, is the backdrop against which Keir Starmer's fate and internal struggles within the Labour Party have been played out. Obviously, the Greens are a much bigger factor recently, but that's been the determining thing. Yeah. And as we're asking right at the beginning of this conversation, the duopoly, Labour Conservative, has been effectively in control of British politics for 100 years.
Yeah.
That's now smashed. It's a kaleidoscope, multicoloured, fragmentary. So we are interested. Two other things I would say. One is I would take issue with what you said earlier about the American media. The American media failed. The Washington Post, New York Times, essentially, but also most of the main broadcast channels. They failed to recognise what was happening under our eyes with the Trump phenomenon. They failed to investigate the Biden family properly, and they were dull. And the last was the greatest crime of all. And that is how Trump got round them. The thing with Farage or Polanski or any populist is that they also know that if they are sufficiently iconoclastic and sufficiently entertaining and sufficiently a character, that they can divert attention away from the reporting and the scrutiny. And also, the other thing is, they know, and this is a lesson from Trump, how to play the outrage game. So there was great reporting over the weekend, not just by the Sunday Times and looking at Richard Tice's tax affairs, but also looking, as you mentioned, James, at the fact that Nigel Farage has received £5 million as a personal gift.
Yeah.
Personal gift from a crypto billionaire who has an interest in the regulation of crypto in this country. Nigel dodged appearance on the BBC, and then, that day, he got his Home Affairs spokesman to come up with the idea that new immigration detention centres would be located in areas that voted Green.
Yeah.
Only those, not areas that voted Reform. Yeah. He was trolling the media and trolling the Greens, and most people followed it. The reason they did it is not because they necessarily thought that it was either a brilliant policy idea or that it would attract attention. It was to get the outrage machine going elsewhere. And that, I think, is part of the challenge, which is that there are too many people in the media who are in a paddy about what is happening in our politics, because it challenges some of their assumptions, and that means they're failing in the duty to the reader and to the viewer and to the consumer to continue to ask questions, not just of the politicians, but of themselves.
But can I just on that point, once you saw the 5 million, once you saw the dodging of the BBC interview, once you saw the plans for the new immigration centres, did you not think, oh, I'm a little worried that we at The Spectator are giving Nigel a slightly indulgent run?
No.
Good. Well, I'm glad we had that conversation. Beth,
I know
can I just finish?
Yeah. I know we're actually out of time, but I'm a bit more optimistic about media scrutiny of all the parties, and the reason is we actually have a really healthy broadcasting landscape here in the UK, and it really is helped by the BBC in the middle, in that there is still an environment where politicians have to meet the audience somewhere, and they do come to broadcasters still to meet the audience. And our job as broadcasters and other media channels, because The Spectator, The Sunday Times and The Times Group, everyone is becoming a multimedia broadcaster now. Yeah. They do podcasts and video and print, right? And our job is to meet the audiences where they are and stay relevant enough that the politicians to meet the audience have to keep coming to us. And I actually think it's a great strength of our market, and I'm a little bit more optimistic that in the end, they can't just completely swerve scrutiny on, for example, big linear television channels in a general election if a few million people will tune in for a debate. So maybe I'm a bit glass half full kind of a lady, but I'm a bit more optimistic about it.
Well, for three reasons, we're going to end there. One is, as you say, we're out of time. Two, as Gabriel says, we need to find ways to appreciate and take confidence in the journalism and the culture that we've got. Yes, Michael?
And for those of you who'd like to know more about the reform scandal, the Spectator podcast, Quite Right, on Acast, Apple, and your preferred podcast provider.
That's what's happened to journalism. We're all in our own marketing department. But for the third and most important reason we're going to end is that if you were here this morning, Tina kicked off by pulling no less than the Pope out of her hat. We're going to end, Tina's going to return, and there is another surprise that she has. There is no end of treats at Truth Tellers. But with that, will you join me in thanking Michael, Beth, and Gabriel? Thank you very much.